Proverbs 9, the ways of wisdom and folly. First, let's read this chapter. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in town. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, and he who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. For by me your days will be multiplied, and years will be added to your life. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. The woman Folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town. Calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their way, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. And this chapter compares wisdom personifies wisdom as 2 women, and with a short interlude in the middle. Although my English Standard Version Bible doesn't have it puts those little headers in there between different sections. It doesn't put a header on the interlude, but it is there. The woman wisdom speaks, and then there's a discussion of the effects of trying to teach different people, and then it goes to the woman Folly. How does Proverbs 9 say we can tell the difference between wisdom and folly? There are lots of places in Proverbs where it's going to give a description and differences between them, but the unique way that Proverbs 9 presents these 2 sides, I think, gives a different sort of perspective.
Well, I think the verses 13 to 18, those are the ones that kind of give you the difference between them. And, it's loud and seductive and knows nothing. And it says, sits at the door of her house. Sounds like, I don't know, nonchalant. I won't say lazy, but maybe nonchalant. And, I guess folly has more of a way of calling you and seducing you and getting you to do things that are not righteous, like, stealing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in the fruit. It's one of those things where it's not necessarily something that's going to happen right away, because they're both offering refreshment, so to speak, is kind of what your prompt was saying.
Mm-hmm.
But that the walk in the way of understanding, and then verse 10, the fear of Adonai is the beginning of wisdom, the knowledge of holy ones is understanding, and that the time spent with wisdom gives you understanding, so you can walk in that way, where the time spent with foolishness or with folly, you're dead and you don't even know it. And I think that's pretty chilling to me.
Mm-hmm. What about the character of these 2 women and the things that they offer would clue you in before you fall into a trap, that this one is a good one to listen to and this one is not?
Well, there's a couple things that I noticed as someone who does hospitality stuff. Is one, that she prepares something wonderful, prepared food, spiced the wine, set her table, wisdom. And then she has these girls that she sends out with invitations. So she's surrounded in part by community, that there are others who are with her. Where folly is by herself, she's coarse. And my understanding of that word is it's more that it's not just that she's simple, but she's base, that it's just an earthy base, kind of gross, I guess.
Yeah.
She hasn't done any preparation. She hasn't done anything to entice, other than sitting at the door of her house, yelling at people to be tempted to come and do to steal something and to do something in secret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all good. what's significant about wisdom that you could see from somebody out on the internet is offering to teach you something, giving advice to people. What about this character wisdom would indicate that this is a good person to listen to, other than just saying, she's the opposite of the foolish woman who's not offering a whole lot?
Did you say what characteristics?
Yeah, what characteristics of this personification of wisdom could you see would translate into someone that you might meet today who's trying to teach you something?
Well, one of the things that I was looking between as I'm trying to imagine both of these women, like, the wise woman, right? So there's the wise woman, the folly woman, and the wise woman, she just seems like, and you mentioned this, Heidi. She's more like a go-getter. She's like hard at work. She's active. She reminds me like what you would imagine somebody from maybe a third world country or an Eastern country that they're not American wealthy, I guess, or Western wealthy, but wealthy enough to where they have servants, like, and where I was born, you didn't have, there's so much poverty that you could be like lower middle class and like have servants. And and my mom had servants, and she would wake up in the morning and she already had everything kind of planned out for the day for them. It's like, hey, I need you to do this, that, and the other. And but it was hard work. It wasn't just laying around like Western type rich. She put a lot of work into her home. And that's kind of the way I imagined it. And the folly woman, to me, since I lived in the world for a long time, it's kind of like a party animal to me when I read it. Like I see somebody down the streets of Bourbon Street, New Orleans, just calling people into the door. Because in Bourbon Street, that's what they would do. Or you'll have like these women at the door calling you to go into these places. You guys can imagine, and calling you in and say, "Come on in. We have discounts or this, that, and the other, or entertainment, and blah blah blah." And to me, that's when I read that. That's kind of, I envisioned someone, and you mentioned this too, Heidi, like loud and just obnoxious, but you won't notice that unless you're wise yourself. You would think it's normal.
Yeah, I think you both touched on something that I think is really significant, and that's the preparation that went into what they're offering. The wisdom has done all of this work that's not even directly relevant to what she's offering. She's built a house, not just a house, but it's a house that's got 7 pillars, and she hewed them out herself. She's done all this work. She prepared a feast. And not only did she do the cooking and, setting the table, but she killed the animal. She slaughtered it. She did everything. And, she's sending her servants out to call people in, but she has done all of this background work. She's done all the hard stuff that enables this feast. Whereas Folly is done, she really hasn't done anything. She's stolen the food. She hasn't sent anybody out. She's just sitting in her doorway. She didn't build her house. For all we know, it's not really her house. She takes a seat at the highest place of the town as if she's got a right to be there, but she hasn't done anything to earn any of it. Wisdom has done all of the background and the hard work to make all of this work, to build something that's worth something to other people. And it's not just bread and water. She probably grew the grapes and fermented the wine herself. But, she's prepared the wine. She's mixed spices with it, so it's not even plain wine. She's cooked meat, bread. She's got all this stuff. Whereas Folly appeals to physical desires by being seductive, but she doesn't have anything to offer you. She doesn't. She may appear to know things because someone who is trying to seduce you and trick you into something or lure you into something will act as if there's something to be learned or some secret or something that you'll get access to. but there's really nothing there. So it's all just a facade. None of this is stuff that she has built. And I think when you're finding people out there, whether on the internet or real life or whatever, and they're offering to teach you or to disciple you, whatever they're offering, have they taken the easy way, or have they really taken the time to study and build something and understand it themselves before they try to offer it? I know that there are a lot of people out on the internet who will make it difficult to tell whether they actually know something. You look at somebody like Bill Nye, the science guy, who has never actually been a scientist, but everybody thinks he knows something because he puts a bow tie on and they put him on TV. But he's just a TV personality. He's a facade. There's nothing behind him. The real scientists probably would be terrible teachers, most of them.
I find it interesting that in the verse, backtrack. What does verse 4 and verse 16, in the complete Jewish Bible and in the ESV, there are two different words. I'm just wondering what the words are in those verses for you guys and what translations you're using.
For which word?
In the complete Jewish Bible, it's simple. Verse 4, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And in the complete Jewish Bible, it says whoever is unsure. And then I was going to look for another one to see if I could see if it was different. But wonder what you guys have.
Well, this is interesting that, I just looked at the Strong's Concordance to see what the word is there. The Hebrew word is petty, which is great. It's it's a false cognate. It's not really what it means, but it means, the literal definition according to Brown Driver Briggs is simplicity, naivete, simple, foolish, open-minded. Probably in the sense of being naive, like open to whatever people tell them, suggestible, maybe that's the word. And what was the other verse, Heidi?
Oh, just in verse 16, because in verse 4 and verse 16, wisdom and folly both say the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same word in both cases.
That's the crossroads, right? That you're at that crossroads. You can go toward wisdom, you can go toward folly, but what is it that brought you there? It's being simple, being foolish, being insecure, being suggestible, being petty. That makes me laugh so hard. And so I guess it's a point of humility. It's like, because we've all been in places when we were foolish or naive or, unsure, but to know that that is the place when we are the most vulnerable toward choosing the wrong direction, depending on what seems most expedient.
See, what do they say? Folly says, turn in here. Stolen water is sweet and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. Wisdom says, come eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. So folly is just saying, come and enjoy yourself on stuff that you didn't earn. Wisdom is saying, change, become somebody different. And I think if you're standing at that crossroads and there are two paths that both appear to offer, something substantial, I think it's not always true, but, one of my mottos for, the last 15 years or so has been, or nothing worth having is easy. So if one appeals to sensuality and doesn't offer a challenge or doesn't ask much of you, it's probably the wrong way. The path that's going to ask stuff back, that's going to force you to change and become something more than you were, is more likely to be the correct path.
Remember when we talked at another Proverbs that you mentioned that wisdom just comes also from like making mistakes as well, from just from doing life, right?
Yeah. You can't make many mistakes if you're not doing anything.
Right. So I guess I can read all of this all day and think that because it's all here, but once I go into the world or take action, I can still easily fail,
Mm-hmm.
and not have it. It's almost like the wisdom is here, but you still have to like go out there and fail almost, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's, now I read Proverbs and all this a lot more, and I constantly read through it. And I don't want to get ahead, but like verses 7 through 12, every time I read Proverbs, because I try to read, the one of the day, like today's the first, I'll read,
Mm-hmm.
one Proverbs and so on, blah, 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 right? And, I've read this one obviously many times, but as I read it, I'm like, man, it is so true. I don't know how many times maybe I try to correct someone who, it just wasn't worth correcting. And now I catch myself almost every day not saying anything. Like, it's just not, like, I tell myself as this person speaking, I was like, it's just not worth me saying anything. I'm just going to stay
Mm-hmm.
quiet, just not say anything, or take whatever they're saying, even if it's against me, and say nothing. just kind of look sometimes and I just smirk and I keep going. But I wonder if I was younger and I would have been constantly reading Proverbs, if I would have looked at this 7 through 12 and then, ran into a fool and then remembered, oh, I remember that it says this. I don't think I would have caught
Mm-hmm.
it like that, like I still would have had to go through the painful exercise of trying to tell a fool not to do something, and, or a scoffer, and still going through the pain of it. And that's like, oh, and then I would have to go back and read this. Like, it's true, man.
Yeah.
It tells me here not to do that. I've read it hundreds of times, but yet I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense?
Yeah, you learn a lot through that process.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. One of the predecessors of the internet, FidoNet, this worldwide network of bulletin board systems. I used to argue with people endlessly. I mean, before there was the internet, I was doing the internet troll thing. And literally, I would just sit at home for hours arguing with strangers on the other side of the world. Most of them were military people, because I don't know why, but these BBSs tended to be on military bases. So it was other servicemen. But I argued with everybody about everything, and it was just entertaining.
Yeah.
I don't have the patience for that anymore. And
Yeah.
so people, you do develop a sense over time about the kind of person that you're dealing with pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If they respond to you in a certain way, or if they approach you in a certain way, right off, this is not somebody who is sincere in actually looking to learn something. This is a troll, or just somebody who's wanting to push some buttons. So I just mute those people. For the most part, I don't waste any time on them. I've learned everything that I can learn from them. I mean, I'm sure that there's something they can teach me, but I'm not going to spend the hours it's going to take to get it. So the cost benefit analysis,
Right.
yeah, it just doesn't work anymore. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I feel like you deserve the Golden Hot Pocket Award or something.
If I still lived at home, I'd ask for some pizza rolls, but this was after I moved out of the house. I don't think we didn't have a computer when I was living at home.
I remember those days. I mean, obviously I wasn't onto the internet as early as those days, but even, early 2000s with chat boards, and people are wrong and they must be educated. And
this was like 1991.
Yeah. So
Way
no,
back
I was
then.
still in high school, huh? But
You are so old.
Yeah, Heidi is
not
old,
that
huh?
old.
I was talking to Jay.
There is, this whole chapter is a chiasm, and I'm not gonna map all that out and show it. I know I've got an article out there, and I might even have a video about it somewhere, but there is a little chiasm that I wanted to point out because it was really kind of cool. If you've done the chiasm course, I showed how when you're doing a small chiasm that just spans a verse or two, that sometimes you have to look at the Hebrew word order to make sure that it's really a chiasm, because the smaller the chiasm, the more important the word order becomes. So I looked at these at verses 7 through 9, because just in the English Standard Version, it looks like there's a chiasm there, and you could kind of map it out, maybe a couple of parallelisms formed into a chiasm. So I went and looked at the Hebrew words to see what the exact word order, and it's actually much better than I expected it to be. So in verse 7, this is rearranged so that it's in the same word order as the Hebrew. Verse 7 starts out, the instructor of a scorner takes shame. So you instruct a scorner, you get shame back. And at the bottom, at the end of verse 9, if you inform the righteous, he gives learning. So you give information to the righteous, you get information back. There's more to that one, but let me finish the rest of this because it will give a different characteristic of the righteous or the wise person. Back in verse 7, a reprover of the wicked gets a blemish. And in verse 9, give to the wise and his wisdom grows. So you're starting to see a pattern in the way that the fool and the wise person respond to instruction. The fool throws things back at you. The wise person takes it in and grows it, makes it bigger, and maybe gives it back to you, maybe gives it to other people, but he gives it away anyways. And then in verse 8, do not reprove a scorner lest he hate you. Reprove the wise and he will love you. And this is all about obviously in the English, it's about the response of the foolish person and the wise person to instruction. But the defining characteristic here seems to be that the fool throws it back at you, uses your words as a weapon, or somehow tries to do damage to you in response. Whether he tries to or not, that's the end result. Whereas the wise person takes what you're giving him, makes it a part of himself, and does something with it. Gives it back to you, gives it to other people, but he makes it bigger. It's kind of like the parable of the talents where the foolish servant buried his, didn't do anything with it. The wise servant took his, took some risks, made it grow, and gave something back. But this really only came out that clearly once you looked at, the more precise word order in the Hebrew. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I had a feeling you were gonna throw a chiasm in there. Seriously, I did. But as I thought about that, I was like, I guess I can force myself to find one, but it didn't pop up just like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, you think of the first part, you've got the woman wisdom at the beginning, and then you have this middle part about how people respond to teaching, and then you've got the end about the woman folly. So the whole chapter is arranged in with the two women on the outside and lessons about how to treat people in the middle, which is sort of chiastic. And then if you map out all the smaller points, there are several parallelisms, and it makes a much more complicated structure. But this one, in verses 7 through 9, are right before the center of the whole chapter. The center of the whole chapter is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so that makes me think that the following verses, 11 and 12, probably also have a chiasm. I just haven't taken the time to look at it. But I'd be willing to bet that there's one there. Because then that would put the whole chapter in a, very symmetrical form. I always feel better about a symmetrical chapter. That probably doesn't make any sense to anybody else. Let's see. One of the things that this made me think of, this do not reprove a scorner lest he hate you, and but reprove the wise and he'll love you, made me think of public schools in compulsory homogeneous education. I know that not all public schools are bad, and that they're not all cookie cutter. A lot of schools really try to, make their education and their lessons fit the students, and they try to cater to the students' abilities. But the nature of the system makes that really impossible, because you are segregating people by age, roughly by educational, capacity, like how much they've learned, not how smart they are, but how much they've learned. Sometimes, at the very top and at the very bottom, you'll segregate people so that, the very smartest people will be separate here in some areas. The very lowest category will be separate in some other area. But for the most part, everybody's all lumped together. The people who don't want to be there with the people who do want to be there. And this isn't really helping anybody, because the people who don't want to be there, they don't need this education. They need a different kind of education, one that's going to make them want to be there. And you're never going to get there by just making them sit in their chair and, giving them detention or whatever it is they do in schools these days. And forcing the kids who want to be there and learn, forcing them to sit there with the kids who don't want to learn, is going to drag them down. They're going to be influenced by that attitude. They're constantly exposed to foolish people saying and offering foolish things. Eventually they're going to give in, and they're going to be pulled in that direction. They may not end up in the same place. I mean, they're still going to end up in a better place, when they're done with school. But they could have been so much further ahead if they just had not been put in this cookie cutter, homogenized industrial blender.
Yeah, they even do. It's even worse sometimes. They have if they do like separate tables, they all these smart kids that want to really learn, obviously they all want to bundle together.
Mm-hmm.
So they split them up and then put the worst kid with the best kid, and then kind of fill in the middle. And the idea is to elevate those kids here at the bottom all the way to the top. And
yeah, and sometimes I'm sure that works.
I think that makes sense, but there's a difference between, a kid being here at the bottom and wanting to learn, and a kid being here at the bottom and not wanting to learn. That's a difference, because I think that the kid that's at the top and the kid at the bottom that wants to learn, there is a benefit to them, because the kid at the top, it teaches them to be a leader and teaches him how to teach, and you learn things better by teaching, right? So it works. But if the kid at the bottom is just distracting, then that's the fool, and that's the scoffer right there.
It just blows the whole
brings
system.
Everybody down.
I think it's interesting that verse 7 is, you have that the other half of verse 7, the reprover of the wicked receives a blemish, and he who corrects a scoffer only gets insulted. Reproving a wicked man becomes his blemish. And that really speaks to what you were talking about, with the trolls on the internet. They develop a reputation of being someone who can't be taken seriously, because they aren't taken seriously. And it's not because they don't have something valuable to say. It's their audience was incorrect. So you can be admonishing someone, you can be educating them, you can be spending all this time, you can be the smart kid with the less motivated child at the table. But if they don't want to hear what you have to say, then you're the one that looks stupid. Because of the
and that's going to be discouraging,
and it's very, very discouraging. And it doesn't say that you only seek to serve and to educate those people who are willing to acknowledge your brilliance, although that does feel amazing. There is that need to have the wisdom and the discernment to know, is this someone who's actually going to hear what I have to say, even if they are naive, simple, foolish, but they just haven't had the opportunity yet? Or are they truly a fool and they just don't care?
Yeah, and I think the only cure for that kind of thing is what you mentioned earlier, Carlos, making mistakes. They need to suffer, and they need to suffer consequences of their own stupid decisions. And sometimes you have to, with kids, you can't just throw them out into the world and, let them make mistakes, because they can make life-destroying mistakes. So if you can do that in some kind of controlled fashion, we have all kinds of programs and things to help with that. We've got, athletics and, all kinds of extracurricular activities where we can put kids in challenging situations, but we keep adding easy buttons. We keep lowering the bar year after year. And I think it's just like organized religion. Denominations may be formed with the best of intentions. Like we're gonna fix these problems, and we're gonna go set up over here because these people have it all wrong, and we're gonna fix it. And they're all on fire for God and doing great. And then the next generation, well, they've got their doctrinal statements and their rule books, and then the next generation after that, they are the church that they left.
No, but I was having a conversation with myself. I wasn't answering myself back though. Okay, so I'm not crazy yet, but about the whole point of like churches, denominations, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I think it's this starts well, with that idea of trying to get an understanding, but somehow it ends up just going off to the side. And I think me, you, and Pastor Mike had a conversation about how to fix that one day. And I don't know, I have my own ideas of because the problem is that it's like my parents' church. We've had the same pastor for the last 25 years or something like that, and I don't think he's a foolish man at all or anything, but I think he's wise actually. But the problem is that that possibly could be there is that maybe he's not wise at certain things, and then the whole church, I'm sure they don't listen to anyone but him. It's the same family that's been there for the last 20 years. There's kids there that I've seen being born and now are married now. And it's just the same thing the whole time. That's all they know.
Yeah.
Is that, right? So
and that's a serious problem. I think that
right.
goes way beyond just denominations.
Yeah.
The whole idea
right.
of professional clergy and the structure that we've set up in churches fosters that sort of situation. And I guess, that's what I was talking about when I got into the denomination thing, was the organizations. We set up all these organizations to help educate kids and to fill in the gaps. Schools can't do everything. So we create athletic programs and, Boy Scouts and Boys and Girls Clubs and all these other things to try to teach kids the things that they're not getting taught at home for whatever reason, and the things that they can't be taught at school because of the way that the system works. But then those programs just become the same system that they're trying to fix. The athletic programs become all about, making stars and winning games. The Boys and Girls Club is just political organization. And, the Scouts have gone that way too. They're just a political organization, and everything's become too easy. So it doesn't serve the same purpose anymore. And those things need to be thrown out and replaced with something else. But they're so entrenched that it's extremely difficult to try to replace those systems, especially when it's supported by government. The entire education system, even, I'm not just talking about government schools, but the entire way that we do education is broken, and it can't be fixed. It just needs to be scrapped and we need to start over with something else. And I don't know what the solution is. I don't think homeschooling is appropriate for everybody. There are some parents that shouldn't be teaching their kids because they weren't taught and they didn't learn the lessons that they should have on their own. And maybe I can blame the school system for that too. I think that's starting to build my own easy button, just blame the school system for everything. But there is definitely a problem. And I think putting the government in charge of these things ensures that everybody does it the same way, and there's no way out. Everybody has to do it that way now because there's too much political capital to be had by controlling these systems and keeping them the way they are and even making them worse. There's no real incentive to fix the problems because there's no power in fixing them. The power is in keeping them broken. So yeah, fools are taking their seats at the high places in town, because they've got some letters after their name. And I'm sure that most of them have worked hard to get some of those letters, but I don't think that they're the right letters for the problem. And I don't know what is.
And I think it goes back to, as you're saying, I don't know what that is, but I think we do. And I think how much of all this, like there's a lot, the whole proverb talks about, this, that, and the other, and describes things about wisdom and folly. But then right, I guess, in the middle of it, it says, pretty much in the middle of it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like there's so many people that think they're wise in their own eyes, and other people see them like that. And I guess it goes back to that you can have all the letters behind your name, but if you don't fear the Father, then what good is that wisdom for you? There's so many people that know so much, and we've seen it the last few years, people looking up to these people with letters, and, even elders, right? You automatically, when you were old, back in the days, you saw an elder net before, like automatic. Why? So I remember my grandfather being at the gates with other elders, and just being like, oh man, that's wisdom, but now, even when I go to work, I see a bunch of older people there. I'm just like, I'm not sure. They're obviously smart, but there's a difference, There's a difference between being smart and being wise, And like, man, I wonder how much of that is lack of fear in the Father, and because of that, they're leading us astray, and we're letting them.
Yeah, you can see that in some of the smartest people in the world. If you look at people like Bill Gates or Elon Musk, they are extremely intelligent people, very well educated. I mean, not necessarily formally educated, but they've educated themselves, which I think if we could figure out a way to leverage that, I've seen unschooling, and it's a disaster wherever I've seen it, but the idea behind it is good, that kids who want to learn will learn if you give them the right tools. But somebody like Bill Gates, who has built a huge multi-billion-dollar global industry, done a lot of really good in the world, but then uses his the money and power that he's accumulated to do a lot of really bad things, and maybe with the best of intentions. And turns out really bad because he doesn't fear God. He doesn't understand right from wrong because he refuses to acknowledge that there is an objective standard. And the same with Elon Musk. These two are on opposite sides of a lot of political issues today. But they're both, accomplished, mostly self-made billionaires. And Musk does and says a lot of great things, but at the core of everything he does is the desire to escape God's judgment. Like, he wants to go colonize Mars in case God decides to destroy the Earth. He wants to put implants in people's brains in case some alien superintelligence comes along and we have to try to compete with them. Like, well, the superintelligence is already here and you will never compete with him. We've tried this before, and, God scrambled all our languages and scattered us around the world. So I don't see this ending well. And it's because they just don't believe what God has told them. They don't fear God. And so all of their knowledge amounts to nothing. They're like this woman, Folly. She knows a lot of stuff probably, but in the end, she knows nothing, because the only thing that counts is God's standards, his standards of righteousness. And there's no wisdom apart from that.
One of the things that, just as I was reading it through and just pondering it and thinking about it, because we live in, a virtual world, here we are on Zoom, and there's so much teaching, and there's so much information out and about, that the kind of turning the impetus from the foolish, naive person being led astray to how do I align myself with being more like wisdom and less like folly.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy to stand in the street corner and yell my opinions to everybody. I'm good at that. but have I prepared myself? Have I been diligent to prepare myself so that what I'm offering is, spiced wine and not stolen water?
Hmm.
You know what verse 9 reminds me of? It reminds me of when Yeshua was saying, when he was saying, let those who have ears hear. And that's kind of like, because there's some people who have ears, but they can't hear.
Hmm.
That's kind of what it reminds me of. It's like, give to the wise, and his wisdom grows. I mean, if you try to give to the wicked or the scorner, I mean, they're probably going to rebuke you or say, that's all you got. It's,
Hmm.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it kind of reminds me of, I think it was the previous chapter, chapter 8, where, wisdom is standing on the high place next to the road or standing at the crossroads. And, at the different places, it just takes a different level of effort to hear what wisdom is saying. But wisdom is speaking to everybody equally. Like when Yeshua was out there teaching on the hillsides or, on the shores of Lake Galilee, wherever he was speaking to everybody who was there. And, whether his words stuck or not really depended on the heart of the person who was hearing, whether they were willing to hear or not. So very similar. So that goes back to that thing about how Proverbs 8 so closely parallels, the whole, Yeshua's character about, how, he's the word at the beginning and, he is God's wisdom personified. And if you listen to his words, you'll gain wisdom. All of those things that Proverbs 8 was saying can be said about Yeshua too. So it makes sense that you'd make that connection.
I mean, it's amazing how Yeshua is also God and God is Yeshua. And I mean, what's the difference? What is your, I don't know if we're getting off topic because I know I just jumped in. I just got off for work. But I mean, that's what I always say. I mean, he's the Father, he's the Son. I mean, but in essence, because he gives it all back to him. But right now, the Father has given him all authority until he gives it back to him. So Yeshua has all the authority. I mean, we can give all glory to God, the Father, but right now, in this moment, he says himself, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. So, I mean, so he's, in essence, our God. I mean, triune. Am I correct?
Yeah, I don't really want to get into the, Trinity or Unitarianism and, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I agree with you. And, when Yeshua says that he only came to speak what the Father gave him, and he only came to teach, he came to teach the Father's law. The law of God and the law of Yeshua are not different. They're the same. And, all of Proverbs and much of the Psalms point back to the Torah as the source of wisdom. Like if you want to know wisdom, then go learn what the law says. And so Yeshua taught us what the law means in real life, how to walk it out. And so all of the wisdom that he embodies really points right back to the wisdom that God taught in Torah. So there really is no difference. They are the same.
All right, thank you.
I was thinking of go back to what we talked about, how you can read this so much, and at the end of the day, you still have to go and experience these things. And it requires discernment as well. And, through the Holy Spirit, being able to understand things. And to me, you grow up hearing these preachers like yelling, being really loud. And maybe it's not my personality because not being loud or being a little bit more of an introvert and being like, man, these guys are really loud and they're moving and doing all these, hand motions and stuff like that. And, verse 13 says the woman's folly is loud. Now, I'm not saying that every preacher out there that's yelling is, a false prophet or something like that. But when you read the scriptures and you have all these directives to kind of point you, if you step back a little bit, you can maybe start gathering those things from that. It's like, yeah, he is pretty loud. Because I talk to my wife about it all the time. Like, we're talking about like, if there's this person that's loud and she's like, and then there's me, who do you think they're going to listen to you? And I'm like, yeah, the reality is that they'll probably listen to the loud person, because it's whoever screams the loudest, the one that gets the attention. And it's a sad thing, especially, at a, if you need something to return at the store or you're at work, whoever screams the loudest is the ones that, get all the attention and everything else. And, the quiet one is left behind. That you have all these preachers, yelling and being loud and stuff like that. And I'm like, there's a difference between raising your voice so people can hear you, and then there's the whole yelling for show. But it seems like for show, and I'm like, theatrics. A lot of those, theatrics. Thank you. And I think to me, a lot of those TV preachers with the whole yelling and stuff like that, I'm like, maybe not maybe, a lot of that stuff for sure is folly. It's like, yeah, because I can't imagine Paul, or Yeshua being like that, right? I'm sure they had to raise
maybe Paul,
voice. Well, maybe Paul at the beginning. Well, I think maybe Paul at the beginning, and then again, I don't know, because it's hard to see. But as I see him progress through the rest of the letters, I see him a little bit more tender, through it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me putting my imagination on him, but just a thought.
Yeah,
I would figure if you have to hype somebody up into a highly emotionally driven state to make them follow you probably don't have much for them to hold on to.
There's nothing wrong with good oratory skills, knowing how to rile up a crowd. There's some use for that. But if that's what you're depending on to really get your message across and to get people to believe you, then that is a serious problem. I've heard this story from a couple of pastors, so I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe it was true when the first person told the story. There was this preacher. I don't remember if the story says that he died while he was, the pastor of this one church, or if he just retired. But the new pastor came in and inherited all of his old notes. And so he's going through all of his sermon notes, and he noticed that, he's got the main notes, and then along the margins he's got, raise your voice here, pound pulpit here, this kind of stuff. And then he finds this one where it says, really weak point, yell louder. So I've heard that from a couple of preachers, but
that's hilarious.
Maybe it was true sometimes. I think it's true in spirit.
Yeah. Now I recently saw like a YouTube video, and there's this guy, and it was a video of this guy looking at another video of these prominent preachers in America, and like Benny Hinn was in there as well. They asked him a question, and he pretty much said something like, you have to like get that emotion out of them in order to like, get him in there, you know what I mean? And and I think that emotion is it's a very powerful thing, but if you're putting emotion before wisdom or instruction, then I think that's where it goes wrong. If you're instructing and then emotion comes from what you just said, then that's different. But when you're already plotting, that I'm going to use this to emotionally, grab somebody, that's where we have to be careful. And I can totally see it, because, I have to be careful with that, because we all grow up with that, the whole sense, to sensationalize things, that we can get caught up on it as well, because that's what sells, man. The reality, the clickbait videos and, everything, you have to be careful, because eventually some people, the people that the really needed are going to see through that, and that's just going to push them away even more from Yeshua.
So I had kind of another take on this chapter, and it's not one of those concepts that's it is black and white, but it's not black and white. Let me be less vague. Is if somebody reproves me and what they say is awful, they're wrong, that they're being abusive, they're being destructive or whatever, that there have been times in my life when verses like this have been used toward me to say that I can only appreciate and accept if someone's giving me reproof, because if I have any other response, then obviously I'm a fool and I'm not spiritual and wise and godly and all of those things. And I just had to throw that in there kind of as a, that we have to be careful with how we apply these scriptures to ourselves and also to others.
Yeah, can I comment on that?
Sure.
I totally agree with you. People, just like the enemy, can use scripture against us. But we just have to be spirit-led. And if it's that time, because there's times where somebody's speaking to you, like going back to when David was getting kind of sneaking out of his kingdom because his brother Absalom was trying to take over, remember? And on the road to sneaking out, trying to escape, one of the commoners or somebody that he knew was cursing him. And one of his soldiers, you remember that story? I don't remember the names, but one of his friends or soldiers, or it could be Joash or whatever his name was, asked, should I pretty much kill him? Do I need to take him out? He goes, no. Because what of the Father, the Lord, he says, has sent this man, and I deserve what's happening. And he did. If you think about it, he did. And sometimes we do deserve, and sometimes we do need to be quiet. And I feel the same way. And I'm the type that, no, don't tell me scripture, because I want to know why you're telling me this. And then I start to realize, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't ask why, and receive and think and consider and ponder. And let's see what's going to happen after this. Is this going to change me? Am I going to think differently of this person? Am I going to, we'll see the next time I see this person. Is this person going to, is this person always attacking me? You know what I mean? Those are kind of things we have to watch for. And that's how my take on that one. Thank you for bringing that up, Heidi. That's awesome. And everybody's comments were amazing. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, I can see where a lot of this stuff could be used as a weapon. It's one thing if a wise person is giving you advice. It's another thing if a fool who thinks he's wise is giving advice. Most of the time, you can probably tell the difference, but obviously they can't.
I think some of that is the responsibility, of as you grow in your faith and you're the older, wiser in fellowship or in your community, that when you have those opportunities, that you check your own heart, you evaluate your own content, your own concerns, and all of that. But also, knowing your audience. And this is when I was much younger in my faith, much younger in my walk with the Lord, when someone could do that to me, or they could back me into a corner and say, no, but this is what scripture says, and this, and if you don't receive what I'm saying, then you have all these problems. And so, some of that is maybe not something that we might struggle with, or I might not struggle with this at this point in my walk, because I don't have a dog in the fight. If I see someone that I'm concerned about, I'm going to share that I'm concerned and I love them, but their actions, their choices, their behaviors, that's between them and the Father. It's not my job to fix them. That's not always been my MO, but it has become that. But in that too is to recognize that this is something that those who are young, eager, very sincere in the faith, who want to learn, who really do want to be corrected, and they know they've come from a fallen place. They know that they've come from a broken place, and they want to do what is righteous. And they can become prime target. I'm not necessarily saying I have a conclusion here. It's just more of a thought process prompted by this, by the
I just want to say to y'all, and because I love y'all, if you see me or hear of anything about me of acting not the way I should be acting according to scripture, I give you authority right now to tell me something. And I'm not gonna, if I get offended, okay, it is what it is. Well, that's just what happens. People get offended, and I still want you to still tell me if I'm doing something wrong, or if I want to let y'all know that I'm here, and I'm not trying to say I want to do the same for you, because I don't know if you'll be able to receive it that way. But the thing is for me, I just want to be true in everything I say and do. And I don't want to be a fake. I don't want to go to the Father and at the end, whatever, and he says, you're a fake. You did not well and faithful servant. You didn't do the scripture. You didn't live the word. You didn't live in me. You know what I mean? And so I want people to say, hey, look, are we living in Yeshua? Are we living in the kingdom? It's in our midst. Are we there? And let's stay in that, because he tells it, it's a commandment. He says, do not worry. It's not saying, hey, can I, don't worry, let me give you, hey, how about you just try not to worry? Or, you know what I mean? He kind of tells us, but we're going to worry anyway. That's just who we are, because we're sinful, we're human. But if something happens, just anywhere, in anything, we should just be Holy Spirit led and to hold each other accountable. I want y'all to hold me accountable. I mean, according to what Paul says, let's hold each other accountable. Hold me accountable. And I probably do. I'm trying to make it to these things, and I love it. I love God and scripture and the word. I'm busy. I mean, my life. I don't know. I got 7 kids and I'm working, and we're very busy, but I need to make time. It's like I'll sleep when I die. That's kind of when I think. I'm thinking, because right now I got to get up. I have to get about 4. I was like, no, I am not just going to skip out on anybody, on what I need to for myself, not having to do with y'all or anything, but just from me, because I'm learning from y'all. Your opinions, your comments, what you say, it helps. It helps encourage me. So I just want to let y'all know, thank you, all of y'all. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Don't stop connecting, because it's time. The time is here. It's coming, and we just need to stay connected. No matter where we're at, how we go about doing it. We're living in a time of technology, so there's no excuses. So that's what I'm saying. We need to stay connected. And I mean, we don't have to get all up into the business, but you know what I mean? Just stay connected.
No. Yeah. You already opened the door. I'm going to start watching you like a hawk now, man.
Who's got the list?
You already opened the door. It's wide open. It's game on. No, I hear what you're saying, man. I hear what you're saying. Yeah. And look, honestly, man, we all, we pray for each other, man. And yeah, I'm sure that if somebody really goes off course, you're going to get a tap in the shoulder, man. But for little things, that's the whole point of us doing this, what we're doing here. That's why we get together for Sukkot. That's why we, do the chat and get together when we can, during Shabbat or some other times. And those things, man, is what brings you back to the straight and narrow path. I'll speak for myself. I deviate from it sometimes, not thinking, on purpose or anything like that. It just happens, life. But one thing I tell my wife, and I'll end my side with this, is that I think it's great that we're holding each other accountable and pray for each other as well. But I tell my wife, I said, the one who's the most responsible for our salvation is ourselves. Because when the time of judgment comes, none of us are going to be there for each other.
Amen.
It's going to be you and him, and that's it. And that doesn't mean, like you said, that we can't support each other and, make sure that one and then maybe 2 of us come to whoever's, going off course. But to me, when I think about that, it scares me, Because when you're a kid, you mess up, your mom and dad are there, even when you're wrong. They're like, okay, he messed up, I got this. But when it's you and him, it's just you and him. You can't say, well, preacher so and so or pastor so and so said, and that's why I did what I did. Like you have to take full accountability of your actions. And to be honest with you, if you're in this group, in my opinion, it doesn't mean we need to slack off, obviously. But if you're in this group, that means that you're at some point said, something's fishy, something's not right. I got to take accountability of my spiritual well-being, of my relationship with him. So I got to go look things on my own. That's the only way.
And I can't imagine. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Joseph, in your attitude. I can't imagine anybody in this group having, being unable to take correction when needed. I mean, we all have our sore spots. We all have pride in some areas, but I think I know all of you, you included, Daniel, well enough that, if I thought something was amiss, that I could go to you and bring it up, and you would at least listen to it and evaluate that. Daniel's not able to be on audio right now, but he posted something in the comments. And we're just going to read it for the recording, because I don't think the comments get into the recording anywhere. Daniel says, I noticed the word 7 pillars and it intrigued me. It's talking about up at the beginning of the chapter in verse 1. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. Pillars is a metaphor, but it includes the number 7. 7 is highly symbolic, from perfection to rest. A woman is usually represented as Israel as well in Scripture, so wisdom can be seeking perfection but knows when to rest. Yeah, I think that's a good observation, that the 7 is completion and perfection. Like all of this is it's reached its fulfillment. But I think that there's also something going on here in the culture that we're not privy to. That these 7 pillars might have been something that, when Solomon first spoke these proverbs or wrote them down, whichever he did, the people listening would have said, "Oh, that's right, the 7 pillars. We know about that." And there would have been, like there's the 7 spirits of God in Isaiah. There would have been 7 pillars of wisdom, and maybe that was a common thing. At least that's the way it reads to me. And each one of those pillars probably represents some aspect of learning and wisdom. And it would be awesome to know what those are. But
I know. I'm sorry. We can only imagine, and we can only assume it's what Paul says, or what other people have come up with. And it's beautiful that you bring that up. You're the best. Thank you, Daniel.